so we can put this out on YouTube. Hi, everybody. It's Julie with Warwick's, and I'm going to give Facebook a minute or two to notify everybody that we're here live with Margarita Montimore and Matt Haig. Hi, you guys.
Hi.
So just a couple things, you know, how things are going to work today. Just so you know, Warwick's is located in San Diego, California, in La Jolla. We are open for business since the shutdown. So if you're in the area, come by and see us and browse wonderful books like Matt's and Margarita's, but we'll also be putting those books into the chat. So easy to quickly just click on those links and we'll ship you that book for wherever you are in the country. Lower 48 though, not sure we can ship them to where Matt's at. Matt's joining us from England today. So not quite sure we can get it across the pond there. And Margarita's joining us from New Jersey. So we've got pretty much all time zones covered today with this event. So we're so excited. So ways that you can participate today too is in the comment section. Margarita and Matt are going to chat for about 35-40 minutes, and then I'll be looking at the comments that are coming in on Facebook, and I'll bring those into the conversation after. So if you have any questions that you have for Matt or for Margarita, put those into the chat and I will bring those in a little bit. So without further ado, I'm going to get this party going. So anyways, here we go. So first of all, to both of you, congratulations on both being Good Morning America selections. So that's fantastic. And that just is, it's so great for it. Obviously it's great for you as authors, but for booksellers, it's fantastic too, because it just elevates it to another level for us selling the book. So kudos to both of you for that. So Matt Haig is the author of internationally best-selling memoir, Reasons to Stay Alive, along with 5 novels, including How to Stop Time. Matt, this is where you and I met in that hot restaurant in Los Angeles. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes, it was October about 2 years ago or 3, yes.
Yeah, and it was so hot, and we were down in that like basement kind of thing. Oh my goodness. Never was so excited to meet you, but never sweated so much in my life.
It was hot.
It was hot that day.
Cocktails. There were very good cocktails that night.
Extremely good cocktails. Yeah. There are some things that like stick out in our brain. I remember the hot cocktails was good. All good. So anyways, back to Matt. And he's also the author of several award-winning children's books. His work has been translated into more than 30 languages. And joining him for the conversation this evening, who will be interviewing him, is Margarita Montimore. And she is the author of Asleep from Day and Una Out of Order, a USA Today bestseller, and as I mentioned, Good Morning America book club pick. After receiving a BFA in creative writing from Emerson College, she worked for a decade in publishing and social media before deciding to focus on the writing dream full time. Born in Soviet Ukraine and raised in Brooklyn, she currently lives in New Jersey with her husband and a dog. We're going to be talking about The Midnight Library, which is a great cover and such a great book. So excited for this conversation. You two have a great conversation. I'll see you in about 40 minutes.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you.
So Matt, hi. It's so great to chat with you. I have to start by saying, when I first heard about The Midnight Library, like I read a 1-sentence summary about it, and immediately I was like, I need to read this book. I need to read this book like tomorrow. Like I added it on Goodreads right. Like I was so electrified just from the premise. And then I swear this had happened like the very next day I saw it was chosen for Good Morning America's latest pick. And I was like, well, of course, this book sounds absolutely amazing. And literally the day after that, my publicist reached out to me and was like, I know it's sort of last minute, but is there any chance The Midnight Library? I was like, yes. Oh my goodness.
Wow. Oh, wow. So when was that? About a week, 2 weeks, not long ago?
Yeah, that's it. Literally. Yeah, like 2 weeks ago. It happened so quickly. And this book, I had this kind of tug of war experience that I have once in a while with books where I wanted to devour it as quickly as possible because I was just immediately immersed in it, and savor it and kind of let the experience last as long as possible because I was just enjoying it so much. And anything that has alternate timelines, parallel worlds, you know, the what if kind of branches that, you know, different roads you can follow, I find so compelling. And I have to tell you, like, it's such a beautiful book, and I have been raving about it to anybody who will listen, and I just adored it.
Oh, thank you, Margarita. And I have to say, having just started yours, I've got a feeling I'm going to feel the same way. And I know, you know, we share, I think, a love of high concepts and playing around with time and playing around with lives and emotion. You know, because it's so strange for me, because I didn't really read much science fiction as a kid. I mean, I read sort of like, you know, soft science fiction, but to be like a science fiction author, for me, it seems a very strange thing. I mean, I know it's sort of technically speculative fiction, but I'm not actually interested in fantasy for fantasy's sake. I'm interested, and I think you're possibly a bit similar to me, in like the emotional potential, you know, how you can use notions of, like, in my case, like a multiverse, and the library, which is the portal to that multiverse, and to use it in an emotional way and how that speaks to us. So I don't use it just as a sort of an escape mechanism, but as a way to sort of always look back and shine a bigger light on reality, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm with you 100%. I'm the same way. I never thought that I would even tackle something like time travel or something high concept. And same thing, where I've read some kind of softer sci-fi, but for me, it's really, it always comes down to kind of like, what's the heart of the story? What are the real issues of everyday life and identity and relationships that can be explored using this kind of larger than life, strange circumstance that you create for your characters. And I'd love to know how this book came about for you. Like, did it come easily? Was there kind of one spark? Like, what was it that, you know, you needed to write this book at that moment for you?
Yeah, well, I've wanted to do a parallel life novel for years. I mean, I've been published in the UK now for over a decade, and I'm quite relatively prolific. I write quite a lot of books. And this one I've been writing all kinds of other novels, while this one has been bubbling away for ages. And it wasn't until I got the concept of the library itself and had the idea of calling it the Midnight Art Library, because you would enter it at midnight. And I thought that was kind of a cool concept and title. For me, I need to get the title almost ahead of the book. Haven't always done that. I don't know about you, but I find as soon as you've got the title, you have the book, and it feels kind of solid in some way. And when I had the concept of the library itself, I thought, oh, okay, I can do this book. I can do a parallel life story, because up until that point, I thought, do I have anything new to add to the mix? Because it's been done. Parallel lives have been done so many times in books, and especially in movies, and we're so used to sort of you know, everything from It's a Wonderful Life to Sliding Doors to Life After Life, Kate Atkinson novel, all kinds of works have been done very well in this area. And so I knew I needed to have a good enough reason to write it and to offer something a little bit new. And I just thought the metaphor and concept of a library being a portal, because for those who haven't read it yet, basically the protagonist Nora, she ends up, she's in a sort of desperate state in her life. She's lost her job. She's had a failed relationship that she regrets. Her pet's died. She's been diagnosed with depression. She's feeling guilty about her long dead parents. All kinds of things are weighing upon her. So she does something rash and stupid. She ends up then between life and death in this library, this TARDIS-like library, where the shelves go on forever, and each book on the bookshelves is a different version of her life. And to me, that's almost what a library is in actual reality. You know, it's a place you can go to surround yourself with other worlds, not necessarily in the literal sense like here, but I feel like one of the reasons we read is to kind of inhabit other lives for a while in a kind of safe way. and deal with our fears or deal with our unrequited loves or whatever it may be. We do it through the proxy of books. So once I had the library idea, I thought, yeah, okay, I'll go for it.
And how did you, I mean, because when you say infinite lives, you know, as a writer, I think, oh my goodness, infinite possibilities. There are so many different directions that you can go with this. So I could see why, you know, it maybe took a while to formulate. And how did you narrow down, you know, which lives? And because at one point, without any spoilers, there's a list of all these different lives. And to be perfectly frank, I would have been happy to read about every single last one of them. So how did you go about sort of narrowing down? Did you have a lot like on the cutting room floor, or but just sort of cherry picking the right ones?
Yeah, well, I mean, having researched a bit of multiverse theory, I know a lot of the, you know, serious quantum physics type people actually do believe in the concept of infinite possibilities within our own lives. So in that line of thinking, you know, we could be having this conversation in any number of different ways, in any number of different places that we could possibly be in 2020 right now. So I thought with that sort of potential, even that scientific potential, it would be a waste to not have a good variety of different outcomes. But for me, the important thing was to balance the sort of like, I don't know, far off, distant dream kind of lives, like the life where she's this pop rock star of kind of Lady Gaga level fame, and she's got it all in terms of money and fame. Give that life and have another life where she's won an Olympic medal. Have a few of those, which is the sort of the fantastical ones, but to balance it with the more sort of, I don't know, everyday quotidian kind of dreams, like a typical British person's dream would be to own a pub in the English countryside. And so that's the first life she enters, is the one where she's still in a relationship with someone she broke off with, and they own this pub together in the English countryside, and to give them some sort of everyday dreams. And obviously, I knew from early on, you know, there'd be a part of that kind of familiar thing we often see in fiction, where you get the dream and it turns out not to be so great. And there's definitely quite a lot of them, and you can have a lot of fun with those lives. But I also wanted at least one or two of the lives to be the lives that she doesn't end up inhabiting, to be kind of good, for there to be nothing overtly wrong with them. You know, like she's with a nice man and they own a vineyard together. There's another life where she's got a kid and she's with a partner who's lovely, and you know, those things. And I wanted, because that would give me more of a challenge as to how, you know, it's easy to reject something if it turns out to be an absolute nightmare that's killed a member of your family or something. But I thought it'd be more complicated and a bit more interesting to have a few of the other kind of lives, which are good versions of the world. But then she finds another way to reject.
Mm-hmm. Like nothing is wrong, but still something feels
Yes.
wrong. And I thought the balance of the different experiences was so well done. And something else that I marveled at, because when writing my book Una, I was just dealing with one person's life, but because it was over the course of years,
Yep.
summarizing just years of a life in a certain number of pages, and you know, conveying so much information and so much time passing in this limited way, and finding just the key details to convey, it was tough enough for me to do. And for you, having other lifetimes to encapsulate, you know, I mean, and sometimes it would be within the scope of a couple of chapters, sometimes it was a few pages, and yet you just were able to get a true sense of, you know, everything that led up to this moment in her life, and why she decides that, okay, this isn't where I need to be right now. How did you do that?
Yeah, well, that was the most fun part for me. I mean, in one sense, it was a challenge because you're kind of writing about 15 novels within one novel, and some of them are super short novels. But even in the super short ones, you need to look like you know what you're talking about. So you need to do some research. I suppose the obvious one I had to research was one where she's a glaciologist in the Arctic Circle. So I had to research glaciology, and I also had to research the place she's in Norway, in Svalbard, in the Arctic Circle. Even though, you know, even that one, that's one of the longer ones, it's not a very, very long section of the book, but you still, you always have to know more than you putting on the page, don't you? You don't want to bore people with limitless information, but you kind of have to know that information. And so generally I write to enjoy myself. And so certainly in that first draft, I was just sort of thinking, you know, where do I want to go? Where, you know, what kind of regrets could she have that would be actually fun to write and fun to read? And I tried to make it feel not too obvious, you know, not too sort of lottery ticket, you know, to have some that feel like they're unique to her in some ways, but also have a sort of universal flavor as well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I what I liked about the concept as well is that it gave me an excuse to write lots of short chapters. Yeah. I'm a massive fan of short chapters. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what, I think it's because I'm a bit attention deficit. So I kind of like, I like white space. I like white space in books. And also it can make you feel like you're reading a big serious book, but actually it's, you know, it's not as long as it feels. And I feel like there's something therapeutic about that, you know, when you're turning a page in a book, and it actually, I don't know, it's kind of nice. And I never like finishing as a reader. Now I'm going off on a tangent, but as a reader, I never like finishing a book mid-chapter. I like to actually get to the end of a chapter. Mm-hmm. So I think one way to solve that problem is to have short chapters, and to, you know, some of mine was one that's just like a sentence, and I like that. And I think it's because, yeah, again, a bad attention span, I think. But so I like writing like that, and I like reading like that. And mm-hmm. So that was another thing that drew me to the multiverse thing, because you know, it's almost like literary channel hopping. You can, but through different lives. The challenge though with that was to not make it too much like it just being a short story collection, to actually have things that build and characters that repeat in different lives and different relationships come in. So that was the challenge, because I didn't want it to feel too just episodic.
That's the same issue I had with writing. Yeah, when it's like a year of her life in different order, and so the early drafts felt like almost like a short story collection. And yeah, when you have these different kind of alternate viewpoints, or these snapshots of all of these different life kind of environments, how do you string them together? Like, I mean, and it's a fun challenge. With writing The Midnight Library, did you find that you kind of outline things ahead of time, or was it more organic, kind of discovering as you went along?
I'm not a planner. I don't know about you, Margarita. Do you plan everything out before you start writing?
Oh, no. And anytime I have, within a few chapters, I have veered every single time. And it's happened with Una. Like, I'll always jot down ideas that I have for the story. And then it always, and for me, it sometimes is a little frustrating, but that's where the real magic of writing happens. It's when the characters almost kind of take on a life of their own and say, no, we're not going to do this thing you want us to do. We're going to take the story in this direction. And, you know, and sometimes you kind of have to hit a few dead ends before you find kind of that right road. Yeah. But for me, I love that organic kind of the finding out as you go along. And so, because it's the same thing as what makes reading so exciting, that, you know, you're surprised along the way, and, you know, that makes it an adventure.
Do you write, and I know Una Out of Order is kind of out of order the way you structure it, but in terms of the book, do you actually write beginning to end, or do you write the bit you want to write at that moment, and then you sort of go back and forth? And
It's funny, with Una, I wrote the first draft pretty much beginning to end, but I ended up rewriting the last third of the book. And
Okay.
then kind of just with sections. So I kind of had to take it apart and redo it. Because also when you're dealing with time travel, you've got the domino effect where you change one thing, you got to go back to the beginning and fix it everywhere else. So, so considering I didn't outline writing it from start to finish and a time travel, like it's lunacy is what it is to not go in with like a set kind of story outline in mind, but it somehow miraculously worked out. But the novel I'm working on right now is actually much more disjointed, where I know kind of what the story is about, but like you, I love stories that are short kind of snapshot chapters and multimedia. So it has like it has emails, it has podcast episodes, it has scenes. And for some reason, this one I'm writing completely out of order. I have part of the last chapter already written, and yet so it's just, I feel like I'm writing each section
So
like
it's
a puzzle piece.
Margarita out of order. It's just like,
It is. It is. And I talked to my editors and I said, like it's going to be a bunch of puzzle pieces, and there are going to be probably a couple of different ways we can arrange it. But for now, we'll see what the puzzle looks like down the line.
Yes. Well, I'm the same. I often start with like a scene that I really visualize and want to write. I have a theory about this. It's almost like, with a music album, you don't want any sort of filler tracks. You just want the actual good stuff. I feel the best way to go about that within a novel is to actually always write the thing you're wanting to write. So you don't get too much A to B exposition, how you get to this certain point. And yes, it does make editing a bit of a nightmare when it comes to the edits, and that's when it really feels like work for me. But I really try as much as possible to enjoy the first draft and to just sort of like, I feel that if you put enough enjoyment or passion or thought into something, at least some of that will spill out to the reader. And if you're being honest with yourself and you're writing the book you would actually want to read in that moment, then you're probably not the only person on the planet who would want to read that book. There'll be other people. So you just try and
that's what I always try to tell other writers too, that, especially, ones that have been kind of struggling for a while, and that, just to have faith that you have a story that is going to find an audience, and that you have something to say that nobody can say the way you can. And it's just a matter of kind of staying with it, keep going until you get the people on board with it. And I totally agree that, when your passion is infused with what you write, it will come across. And it will, for me, I love it when stories, whether it's a book, a show, a movie, about something I have no interest in, just completely captivates me because of the way that it's written and the way that the story is presented. And I mean, I remember reading a nonfiction book about lobsters, and I never had any interest in learning so much about them, but it was a fantastic book.
I'm reading a nonfiction book about fungi.
Oh, really?
And I did not realize I was interested in fungi, but it's a book called Entangled Life, and I think it's out in America too. And it's one of those books where I like a book where it's about something and it makes you feel like it's about something important or super magical and opens your eyes in a new way. But you've never thought, I'm 45 now, you've never thought in your 45 years that you have any interest in fungi or mushrooms or things like that. But it actually presents it as if it's like as important as the categories of animals or the category of plants, and it's the category of fungi. And how have you heard of the Wood Wide Web? How trees.
I was just gonna say, because I'm reading this book Underland, and it talks about the fungus that serves as like the internet for trees.
Yes, well, Underland, we're going off on tangents now. Underland is by Robert Macfarlane, isn't it? I think.
I believe so.
Yeah, it's a British book. And the writer of the book I just mentioned features in the book of Underland. It was a
Oh,
chapter
that's
where
so
we go
funny.
for a walk in the woods, and the guy who's written, we should be talking about our book, shouldn't we? Anyway, the guy who's written Entangled Life, he has a bottle of cider which he got from the apples from Isaac Newton's tree, the apples that fell on
Oh,
Isaac Newton's head.
yes.
He's branded his own homemade cider and called it Gravity, which is a nice little thing. And he's on a walk with the author of the book you're reading, within the book you're reading. Anyway, sorry, yes. So yes, I do like that. I do like that type of book. And I am fascinated by that concept of trees
Oh,
communicating with each other and sharing information, and how the thing about this fungi book is about how intelligence may not just be brain specific. You know, they're actually making decisions, these sort of micro organic life forms. Anyway, sorry.
no, I know I could go off on things like that. So to bring it back to the Midnight Library, because I feel like a lot of people are saying that it's a really beautiful companion piece to Reasons to Live, like the kind of fictional counterpart to it, and which for those who aren't familiar was a memoir, hugely successful, where you opened up about your struggle with depression. And I'm curious, what was it about the Midnight Library that made you want to explore similar, themes of kind of what it's Nora's Reasons to Live is what a lot of this book covers. And what was it that made you want to view it through a female protagonist? Like, was it to keep a little bit of that objective distance, or what?
That is absolutely 100% it. And true story, I'll tell you here and now, when I started writing the first draft of this book, the character I was writing was male. I had the concept of a midnight library, and the library looked how it looks in the book and all of that. But the character I was writing was male. It was called Adam, but then his name kept on changing. And I think it's always a bad sign when the main character's name keeps on changing. It's like you can't quite picture them as something real. And I think the problem was because I was writing about this male character who was going through mental health stuff, and I'd written non-fiction books about my own experience of depression and panic disorder and having a breakdown when I was younger. And I thought, I'm just sort of writing myself. I'm just writing a version of me. And it's like when you look in the mirror for too long, you can't see yourself as others see you, and you can't properly, you don't know what you look like. And I didn't know what this character looked like because it was too me, if that made sense. He wasn't a character. It was just sort of me. And so I wanted to change that while also keeping the mental health themes within the novel. And so the easiest, most obvious way of doing that was to switch the gender. But yeah, obviously being a male writer writing female protagonist has its own pitfalls, but I genuinely found it easier to see her as a character once she was clearly separate to me. And in a very strange way, it ended up being almost more autobiographical because I felt safer to actually put a lot of my own sort of mental experiences, certainly like the feeling of depression she has in the sort of quite heavy first section where she's wandering around, that was me when I was wandering around a place called Croydon in South London when I had a dead-end job years and years ago, and just under the grey sort of British skies. And that feeling I was giving her was how I had felt back then. And it was kind of freeing to always know she was Nora, but be able to sort of put myself into her. And obviously I had to remember I was writing a female character, so her experiences would be different to mine, but I feel like the universal stuff about what minds feel like in that depressed suicidal state and stuff, that's kind of universal. And she's quite introverted in some ways, but she's very inward by the nature of having sort of depression and things like that. So all of that stuff, I knew her instantly, if if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my first reader is my wife, Andrea, anyway. So she tells me when I'm being a corny male author and getting things stupidly wrong or embarrassing, or the sex scenes just ridiculous or something. And she'll tell me to, so there's a few bits I was being typical male author getting wrong. But I just understood her as a character.
Mm-hmm. And yes, I think that without knowing who wrote the book, I did feel like it captured, her essence, and I wouldn't question the kind of the fact that, a man wrote a female perspective. I love it when writers push themselves to kind of inhabit other skins and other perspectives. One of the things too that I found so just admirable, the way that you tackled these very dark and heavy themes, but in a way that felt accessible and, compassionate, and not in a way that just kind of weighed you down. And is that something that you think about consciously as you're writing, that like, okay, we need to balance with like a little bit of humor or lightheartedness, or is that just, does that come about on its own?
No, definitely. This is very important to me because I've written, not all my books are about mental health stuff, but I've written 2 nonfiction books now about mental health, and this novel directly. And even my last novel, How to Stop Time, had elements of it. And I think the challenge I always set myself is there a way to write about depression which is honest but not depressing in itself? And so that's what I try and do. And I can remember being suicidal in 24 and 25 and finding it incredibly hard to read anything vaguely about anything mental health. And if it was too heavy or too pessimistic, it would literally, I'm not a fan of trigger warnings, but it would actually sort of trigger me, and I'd be, I'd really feel it. And so I'm very conscious of wanting to be authentic about mental health stuff, but also aware that I don't want to make people feel crap. I want to almost find the hope within the dark place. And so what I like trying to do is I always start in a bad place, start in the bad place, and then try throughout the course of a novel to find the hope within it, because then I think it's more hopeful than if you've been rainbows and unicorns from the start and everything is happy and cheerful. So that's what I definitely tried to do with the Midnight Library. I tried to sort of keep it light, but I think also it's naturally how I write. I don't want to write too heavily and morbidly about it. And even the people who are famous for having written, the classic writers who are famous for writing about depression, like Sylvia Plath, for instance, there's actually a lot of joy and humor in a lot of their works. There's this idea that mental health issues are somehow totally on a different planet to the world of humor and smiles and laughter, and they very often go together. Even during my worst patches of depression, even though it was horrendous to live through, there was a kind of black humor to the situation, because when you've got something like depression, especially the kinds where you don't actually physically look any different, you look like a relatively healthy young man, for instance, in my case, and as I was then. I'm not calling myself a young man now, but when I was actually a young man, and you feel like a fish out of water because your head's on fire, but no one can see the flames, and you'll be sort of sitting around the table with your mum or something, and she'll be going on about couldn't find the car keys or her day at work, and it will seem so almost hilarious that there's a person whose head's on fire, but because you can't see the fire, all this normal stuff's going on. So I can remember it as sort of very darkly humorous. And I think, humor, I'm not saying Midnight Library is particularly funny, but I try and have a kind of little light touch. I don't throw jokes in. I don't put like jokes, and
Right.
I don't do
But
stand-up
I think
routine.
that's what makes it realistic, that, you know, people are just, we're not one thing. We're not just dramatic, just humorous, just romantic, just tragic. And I'm also a big fan of gallows humor. So I feel like that's also where you find those moments of light and the hope, kind of like Dorothy Parker's poem about all the different methods of committing suicide and
Yeah.
how, you know, it's just not worth it. You might as well live. So I love that sentiment, and that kind of the darkest place will still, like, if it can inspire you to laughter, then I think there's this subconscious sense that it can't be as bad as all that, because we're still finding that kind of ray of hope and, you know, of possibility. And I'm sure you've had at least somebody else ask you this before, but when you have a premise like the Midnight Library where you can explore infinite lives, of course, everybody's going to start thinking about, oh my goodness, what alternate lives would I love to like get a glimpse of, and, you know, not necessarily inhabit, but just visit for a day or two. And in your case, is that something that you've thought about? And what are some of your alternate lives you wish you could kind of get a peek at?
Yes. Yeah, of course. I mean, I really try now to reach the point of acceptance where I don't have major, super massive regrets. My regrets are sort of little, sort of trivial things. Like, I used to do piano lessons, and I used to go as a child every Friday evening to Mrs. Peters to do my hour of piano. And I was getting quite good up until the age of sort of 13, 14, when I suddenly stopped because I was a self-conscious teenage boy, and it was not the coolest thing suddenly to go to your piano class on a Friday night to Mrs. Peters, when you could be off being a delinquent somewhere. So I gave it up. And I sometimes wonder about the timeline where I kept doing music and hadn't done that. So there's a bit of my wish fulfillment in Nora's story, because she's quite musical. Interestingly, in 2020, I've got a piano behind me, and my son and daughter are learning the piano, and they have this app called Simply Piano, which is really good, actually. I'm not sponsored by Simply Piano. I'm not being an influencer, but yeah, and I've been redoing it at the age of 45, but it's kind of frustrating when you're 45 learning the piano with a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old, because you're spending the same amount of time on it, and they're just like whoosh, and you're like stuck in the same with your same slow old man's neural pathways trying to
Anyway,
anyway,
I also played piano as a kid, so yes, I know very well, like, kind of that. I think my mother to this day hasn't entirely forgiven me for giving up the piano, but yeah, that's definitely.
How old were you? How old did you carry it on till?
9 to 12, 3 years I lasted, and I just couldn't stick with the practice of it. I realized that, you know, if there's anything that I'm going to kind of dedicate my life to, is going to require me spending so many hours on it. And so it has to be something that I love to spend hours doing. So when reading and writing became my, you know, the two kind of interests that I could just get lost in for hours and hours, I knew, like, okay, this is the path where, like, I can take career wise. But of course, you're always you know, you do wonder about the what ifs, and somewhere out there.
And that's why I wrote it, because I can remember, like, going back to like my bad times in my 20s, I used to have a lot of what ifs. I used to have a lot of regrets, and that's what depression used to feel like for me. It just felt like regret, on a very sort of heavy, almost physical level. And so really, you know, I kind of wrote this as kind of self-therapy to actually, you know, accept things and accept the infinite possibilities of one timeline, and not necessarily, you're not going to be a rock star, you're not going to do this, that, and the other, but to actually embrace the life you're given and the timeline you're in, and actually to realize you can enter a different universe at any time just by making a decision.
And is there, I mean, I find that like anything you write involves a process of discovery, whether it's learning about the characters, learning something new about glaciers or multiverses. And what did you find kind of what was the process of discovery with this book that, you know, sometimes you learn something about yourself in a
Yeah.
great scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think yes, I definitely learned about a lot of the lives. I learned about glaciers. I learned a little bit about vineyards. I learned about dogs' homes. I learned about all that stuff's kind of fun. But it really did actually. I think something clicked with me because I was so writing Nora and her development. So I was sort of almost having the same development. So as Nora progresses, she goes from being someone who feels that life is happening to her and she has kind of no agency over life, to being someone who slowly comes to the realization that she's actually got that agency, and she's becoming that person who's the narrator of her own life, the writer of her own life. And so I definitely got that sort of therapy from it about accepting. I wouldn't say I've reached a sort of Zen-like Buddhist kind of state of acceptance, but I feel like it's definitely helped me on my journey with that. And also it's made me realize there's a lot of chess in this book. And she plays chess with a librarian, and I realized that chess is great for metaphors. Chess has got, I think one of the reasons why it's been around for thousands of years and people still play chess is it's kind of about life itself. And you know, the idea of a pawn being able to become a queen just by going forward one space at a time, if they just keep their head down and keep going forward, they've got the sort of all-powerful version of themselves inside them. And I love that. You can find so much inspiration from a chessboard. So chess, that's the other thing.
Fantastic.
Hi.
Sorry, we're running into that time. We're running into that time thing. I feel like I'm coming in from different lives, right?
Yes. Were you there a long time, Julie? I didn't see you.
No, I was in the background. I was out. Just listening in the back. I was in that parallel time zone with you guys.
Yeah.
Well, that was one thing. Yeah. Well, the one thing they were talking about with chess and everything, and one of the themes that's sort of in both of your books is the infinite possibilities and potential, and the potential that people have. And I think that was one of the resonating things that I came away from both of your books with. It's all about embracing that potential that we all have.
And it's funny, Matt, what you were saying about how when you're writing it for a character, it sometimes takes longer to internalize it yourself, because I found the same thing happening. Like, you know, Una for me was like a lot of like wish fulfillment, like what are the eras I'd want to revisit and the experiences, the different lifestyles, and then, you know, kind of dealing with aging at the same time. And just as it came about that, you know, part of what she needs to do is accept the day to day and, you know, every moment that she has, you know, that's something that I also had to kind of learn for myself and remind myself too that, yeah, like, you know, you may not be able to control what happens like a year from now, or, you know, but you have today and you can do everything in your power to make this the best possible day that you can. And that's how you kind of can take that agency over your life.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. And the same. And I always saw Nora, the reason her surname actually is Seed is because I just saw her as this potential who could sort of grow off in different directions. And yeah, I feel like there's a balance, isn't there, between sort of being satisfied with the potential that lies ahead, but also not being swamped by hypotheticals. Oh, I could have done this or I could have done that. So it's kind of like about growth, but also acceptance at the same time, and accepting yourself as you grow in whichever direction you do.
Yep. And and by the way, everybody that loved the fact that you went off on the tangent about the fungi and the underworld, they were loving that on the side. So that was a good part of the conversation. So no worries about that. But I was also one of the things when I was like knew that we were gonna be able to host both of you. I just had this picture of both of your offices just with like post-its and time and days and all over. So it was really good to hear that it's like, no, just kind of wrote it through, and because I can't even imagine what it was like to try to put all of those different time things together.
Yeah.
I do dream about the day where, and I've thought about maybe doing some research to get one of those humongous bulletin boards, to get like a murder board with like the string and oh my gosh. And for the book I'm currently working on, I even thought like, okay, is there any way that will actually help me and be useful? So I know someday I'll get there, but you know, I think it's finding the project that will merit that. But oh my goodness, those look like so much fun.
Yeah,
I know a thriller writer who does this, who actually, it's almost like a police headquarters. They have arrows, they have charts, they have like flow charts and this, that, and they work it all out. They have different things. But I couldn't do that. That just would sort of, my brain would explode.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get to some of the comments. There were lots of great comments. Everybody loved Tamara, for you, Margarita, loved Una Out of Order, and she cannot wait to read The Midnight Library. Kimmery has a great question. So she loved both books. Did either of you write live/years that did not end up in the final versions of the book? I think it kind of answered a little bit, but so Matt, let's start with you first on that question.
Well, yeah, I definitely did, because initially the character wasn't Nora, so it was a man having different experiences. Even with Nora, I'm trying to think now which lives I went off in, but there was a life where she was in Paris that just became a little bit, I felt a bit cliched, and there's it was just a question of there being too many lives. So what I did was some of the lives are still in there, but I shortened and truncated them. So I have a chapter in the book where I sort of list all the lives together really fast. So I didn't completely throw them out, but I just didn't spend much time.
That was a great chapter, by the way.
I'll have to read the outtakes someday. But I also, same experience where I did have, initially when I started writing Una, it was, I wanted to spend more time in the 80s because I feel like I was born 10 years too late and I was just too young to really appreciate what a great decade it was. So I had a leap and a section of the book that was set in the 80s later on. And just during revisions, it didn't fit. And I needed to take it out and rewrite it. And because of what the story needed and the characters that needed to be there, it was actually this different section was set in the 90s. So if I ever write the next book, which I've definitely been jotting notes about and different like other things, like I have like 5 leaps planned, but it will absolutely include more time spent in the 80s. And there were different things that kind of ideas that I had that I jotted down ahead of time, some of which I developed, and then like you need to find kind of what is the through line and what feels kind of more episodic. Like if you could take it out and it doesn't leave any holes in the story, then you kind of need to take it out. So, but you know, you hold on to that because you never know, that could be the seed for something else.
The 80s were wild, that's for sure. I had the big hair. Okay,
I had hair.
So Lori said she loved Midnight Library. I've told so many people about it. Samantha writes that the Midnight Library is such a beautiful book, read it in an afternoon and just couldn't put it down. Stephanie's saying she loves the multi-universe. So let's see here if we got some more. Darcy is asking for you, Margarita, will there be more Una?
I think in my heart, her story isn't over. And I know that I definitely started writing ideas, and even like the first chapter, I know what the title is going to be. I know what some of the kind of overtones of the story are going to be. But I think for now, I just spent so much time in the Universe that I need to kind of focus on, I want new characters, new experiences. You know, I want to make sure that I'm sort of flexing different muscles, researching other things, learning about, you know, just sort of different characters, different scenarios. So down the line, again, at least for me, I don't know how much people will want another book, but if I can find a good journey for her for that book, and I feel very kind of conflicted about sequels, because of course, when you love something, you want more of it, but you don't just want a carbon copy of it. You don't want a watered down version of it. So for me, it's so important that it's still, it has something of its own to say, and that, you know, it really kind of has its own message, its own point of view. So, and that might take a bit of time to find. So here's
okay.
hope.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a question for both of you. Craig and Matt, we'll start with you first on this one. Craig asked, do each of you rely on direction from your editor to pivot in your character or scene while writing?
Not, I mean, my editor doesn't see it until I've sort of been happy. I'm happy with the first draft. And then, you know, I've got quite a hands-on editor who will say, who'll have notes all through the whole thing and be quite thorough. I mean, often I ignore those notes, or or something sparks from what they're saying, but it won't necessarily be the thing the editor is saying. Sometimes in some books, there will be a massive change. Like 2 novels ago, I wrote a book called The Humans, and literally because of what my editor said, I ended up deleting like 40,000 words, adding in 45,000, you know, so there can be major stuff. I sort of go through my edits almost flinching all the way, dreading something like massive, because there's times where you really don't want to listen to the editor, but you know they're right. And that's the most annoying thing, when they're right. It's lovely when they're not right, because then you can just ignore them, or you feel passionately about something. But more often than not, they are kind of right. And you really do need to listen to the editors, because when you're writing a book, however good you think you are, or whatever, or however good you are, you're you, and you're writing it from yourself. So you need some outside eyes to look at it, and to actually, like, you trust. And I'm lucky that I've been working with the same editor for years, and you get a relationship where you understand their strengths and their weaknesses, and you sort of know their taste. So you know when they're actually saying it because they're right, or they're saying it because that's just them.
Well, because then they want the best for you for the book anyway, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
How about you, Margarita?
I also, you know, however stubborn writers might be in their like artistic vision, I think, you know, getting that, especially professional input. You know, my first line of defense is my beta readers and critique partners, and you know, I see what patterns of feedback emerge. So sometimes there will be something I'm stubborn about, but if I have 2 or 3 people telling me this isn't quite working, you know, sometimes I need that little extra nudge. With editors, I am pretty receptive. Again, like Matt, you know, I'll cringe, and if it feels really daunting and big, sometimes I just need to put it away and kind of let the puzzle marinate and sort of sort itself out, and then aha, you know, until you have that moment where you can think of what the solution is to it. And for Una, I was very lucky, actually. I had editors, and my US and UK editor both gave me notes. And I know some writers would be kind of balking at that, oh my God, like I had pages and pages of notes from both. And initially I was a little bit intimidated, but when I read them, I saw they complemented each other so well, because one set of notes focused more on kind of like story mechanics and the world building and detail, and the other gave like really specific places where like the character relationships could be enhanced, their identities. So I really just, I embraced it, and kind of, I I think it's just a matter of finding what is that common ground where, you know, your editor is there to have you convey the best story possible. That, you know, they know what readers will go for, what they won't go for, while still, you know, remaining true to what it is you're trying to say. And my current experience is actually a little different because I'm working with my editor as I write the book.
Mm.
And I'm finding it's so interesting to have this other way of working and sort of to see it. I'm still, you know, shaping the story, but also to get that feedback and support as it goes along. So it makes me feel like it's less intimidating than getting that giant edit letter, because instead of having to rewrite a third of the book afterwards, knowing sort of which way, you know, how to shape it as I go makes me feel like, okay, you know, revisions won't be as overwhelming because I'm sort of fixing things while I write them.
I'm far too fragile for that. I literally have to hide away and think I'm a genius for months, and then I say I know it's the risky way to go, but I worry that if I show my editor too early, I will abandon the thing, because I'm such a neurotic that I need them to faint with wonder at how amazing it is in order for me to actually finish the first draft. So basically I'm saying you're a better person than me, Margarita.
Oh no, I'm really not. The only reason I have this like less conventional method now is because after Una, I started 5 or 6 or 7 different novels and wrote anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 words of them and abandoned them and didn't show them to anybody, because I'm like you. I'm usually a control freak. I need to have the story done and polished and like then it's ready. And I got to a point where like nothing is going to be done. Like I need to, you know, granted, I need the gentle, like, go you, rah, 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 until, you know, I can still handle the constructive. So having a little bit more sort of hands-on along the way has actually motivated me to keep going and finally lock in on a story that I know, like, oh, I'm going to finish this because I have so much to say. I have so many ideas. So, and I think it just goes to show that whatever method has proven to be effective, sometimes it just stops working and you need to try something new and just go with it.
Okay, so we got time for maybe 1 or 2 more quick ones. Well, the last one isn't so quick, so I'm going to give us some time for that. But Samantha asks, and Matt, I can't remember what you said in the in your interview about this, but she's asking, how did Matt feel about the Midnight Library being made into a film? So is it going to be a film, or what's happening with that? Do you know?
Well, it's been optioned for film. The film rights have sold. It's been sold to 2 European companies. It's Blueprint Pictures, who did 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. They did Exotic Marigold Hotel, and also Studio Canal, who've done big films like Paddington and stuff. And I went with them because they've made a film of one of my children's books, which is out next year, which is A Boy Called Christmas, and that has been made. And we were very lucky that filming stopped in January, and they've got a great cast for that. So it wasn't affected by COVID. They've got like Maggie Smith, Kristen Wiig, and people in that. And that will be out at Netflix and hopefully cinemas next Christmas. But yes, so it's very early days for the Midnight Library movie, but I went with the people who I felt were most likely to get it made and who I trust to make it well. So we will see. They want to make it. They're looking for writers and talking to directors and stuff like that. But I'm old enough and ugly enough to have been around the block so many times with my grown-up novels where they've been optioned and nothing happens, but you're grateful for the option and nice little bit of pocket money, and you keep going. But the first time, when I was 26, my very first novel, which no one read in America at all, I don't think, was optioned by Brad Pitt. And so I thought, okay, I'm moving to Malibu. That's it. I'll never have to work again in my life. And I was just so naive. And, I should have just been grateful that Brad Pitt had read my book. But So I learned the hard way about disillusionment, and films and things like that. But there is actually finally a film being made of my children's book. Yeah.
But that is, I mean, there's so much with Hollywood that goes on with that. But at 26, man, that still had to have been great. Okay, so this is for both of you. But real quick, Margarita, Una, how did you pick that name?
I love alliteration. So firstly, I have a spreadsheet that anytime I come across a name that I like, first name, last name, names that are unisex, I just add it to the spreadsheet. Sometimes I'll be like talking to somebody and I'll be like, oh, your name is going on my spreadsheet. So I think it was because of Una Chaplin years and years ago. Ever since I came across her, I was like, oh my God, Una is the best name. It sounds so distinct and so unique. So it was on my spreadsheet for ages. And then as soon as I came up, like Matt, you were saying, once you have the title, for me, titles either come pretty quickly or they're absolute agony and take ages and they torture me. And with Una, as soon as I had Out of Order, I was like, Una Out of Order. Like it just came instantly. And thank goodness, because I've been tortured before. So
that's good.
They say don't judge books on covers, don't they? But I do judge them on titles. I think, and Una Out of Order just sounds like a book. It just sounds right. And also
titles are important.
Yes.
Yeah, it's part of the thing.
Yeah, because if it's not something that stands out, people forget. They mix up the names. I mean, trust me, as a bookseller, it's like it's the one with the red cover that was on the table 2 years. It's like, oh dear God, help us. Okay, last question for both of you. And Margarita, we'll start with you and we'll give Matt the last word here. So what, if anything, is the main thing you hope the readers take away from your book? So Margarita.
Starting with me.
We're starting with Margarita.
I'm so glad that this question was asked because it was on my list. I had a whole long list of questions that I knew I wasn't going to get to all of them. And that was on my list. I wasn't expecting to be asked the same, but I would say, for me, it's been so gratifying that readers have found a positive escape through my book. Like, I think that all of us are craving comfort and getting lost in a positive way, but also feeling like, we are coming away with something, like taking a closer look at our own lives. And for me, it's also a matter of finding that gratitude wherever you are in your life. And, like there's always going to be things that we wish we'd done, or parts of our lives that we wish were different, or, things that are out of our control. But I feel like it's just a matter of how you look at it and your perspective on it. So, for Una, her life is so messy and disordered and chaotic, but she learns to just find those things. It's just a simple line from the book: notice more, appreciate more, and that a character says to her. And I've just taken that to heart. If I had any tattoos, I should probably get that tattooed on my body, because whenever I feel like that's slipping, or I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed or just snowed under and things, I just I kind of step back and say, okay, notice more, appreciate more. And it's something so simple that anybody in any circumstance can do to find a way to just have that positive moment, and that moment of comfort, and being present in their lives.
Excellent. Okay, Matt. Stephanie. That was a great question. So thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, great question. And it's kind of similar to Margarita. I mean, Nora is someone who's sort of kind of like starts off obviously unhappy with herself. And the reason she's unhappy with herself is she's got all these kind of fears and regrets about life. And if you think about what regret is, regret's about the past. So when you're full of regret, you're kind of not living in the present, you're living in the past. When you're fearful, as a lot of us have been this year, you're kind of living in a hypothetical future, and you're never actually able to sort of live inside the present. So hopefully, and some readers have said they get a kind of like a sort of mental switch in this book, where they actually are able to sort of see their own lives and accept their own lives and their own sort of present tense a bit more. And that's kind of why I wrote it. And the librarian in the book, Mrs. Elm, she tells Nora throughout at multiple times that the only way to learn is to live, and it's through living and accepting the first draft, which is her own life and her own root life, that she actually realizes she has far more than she ever realized before, and hopefully the reader gets that sense too.
Fantastic. This was an amazing interview. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to be with Warwicks today. Can't thank you enough.
Yeah, and hopefully when it's 2021 or 2022, we will be doing this in San Diego. Yep.
Both of you come and do it again. We still have so much more to talk about. I think Margarita's right. We could keep going on with, because there's questions, Matt, I want to ask you about the end of the book, but this isn't a spoiler, so we can't do that. So, Margarita, just real quick, people can find you. Do you have a website?
I do, montimore.com.
Perfect. And Matt, how about you?
I'm all over social media, but I'd advise people not to follow me on Twitter unless they like my sort of stream of consciousness rants. Or I'm much better on Instagram. I'm Matt Z Haig. I made up a middle name for myself when I was 8, Zerebral, but it's Matt Z. I'm sorry, I should speak in American. Matt Z Haig.
Love it.
Matt, we'll talk separate. I made up a middle name for myself too as a little girl.
You two are cracking me up. Visit warwicks.com. We have great interviews all week long. It was a pleasure hosting both of you. We're going to say goodbye to Facebook Live.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, everybody.
Bye.
And